This video is going to be a little bit different. What I'm doing is showing you some ways that you can parse data in SIMPL+. I had some problems as I was developing a module. I thought it would be good to share some of the strategies and techniques that I used that helped me solve the problem. This particular problem, it's a Roku player and it communicates back with TCPIP. This isn't the whole program. I'll show you the server thing in a moment, but basically I have an incoming string it's from a TCPIP client. It's feeding into here. I need to parse it out and return the player name. So the challenge was, because it was going through SIMPL, strings are limited to 255 characters normally, unless you're dealing with them as a buffer, which SIMPL doesn't really make that work very well. In SIMPL, a string is basically a stream of characters until you put an MSP on it, then it kind of becomes a permanent string. I mean, they call it make string permanent, but that still doesn't solve the problem. So what we're seeing here, this data, this return data, it's got this ... So if I look, this is Sublime text that I use, but if I look at these characters here and look at the count, so right there at 250, so 254, so it probably cut it really close to 255, and it just chopped it up. And then this other section occurred in probably the next logic wave. I'm not even sure if this data was trace data or where it came from. That didn't really work because what we were trying to do is parse out this player name equals YouTube TV. We couldn't, or I couldn't capture a string with a delimiter. Like you can see, the delimiter of 0A is probably a good spot to break these apart into different records and then parse them out. So that would be kind of the first approach, but it falls apart when you get to that broken up part. And I'll just show you just visually here what that looks like. So on this one here, it starts, but then there's not really an ending to this. And the way that it's handled coming into a module like this, it kind of has some problems. So the first part of the problem is I needed to figure out how to parse this. The second part of the problem is I needed to figure out how to test it. I put together like a long string. I put some data in there that I just kind of made up so that I could test this name here. I just put a different name in here. And I needed to be able to send this all at once. You can't send a string like this from debugger because look, it's 556 characters. The concept that I came up with that I figured would be the easiest to implement was a TCPIP server. So what I did is I put that in my program, and you just add that as an Ethernet device. You have to press F6 and set the net address. It defaults to blank. You need to put 0.0.0.0 to accept connections from everyone. Now keep in mind this is unsecure plain text. It's not something that you're going to use for production. I'm just using it to help me test this module. So with that, I have the enable high. I don't care about the transmit. I'm watching connect and status just so I can see what's going on in debugger. And then I've got my in string, which is coming from another device. So basically I'm connecting from my computer into this TCPIP server and sending my long 500 and whatever characters of text. Now the other thing to note is the port. I use 50,000. If you press help, F1, Crestron recommends using private port numbers from 49,000 to 65,000. And that's because the lower numbers are reserved for system functions like web server at port 80, SSH at port 22, FTP 23, Telnet, and all that stuff. Some of them are closed, but there's reserved stuff. It won't let you fire up a TCP/IP server at lower ports. So with all this done, that solved that problem, and I'll show you how I connect to it. But first, I just wanted to show you my quick little module and kind of break down how I approach the parsing. So I built just a pretty basic SIMPL+. The inspiration for how to do this, the help file actually has some good tidbits of information, just SIMPL+ help. So if you go under SIMPL+ tutorial and then working with strings, under buffer input, this is where I found some clues on the best way or a good way to deal with this. Removing data from buffers. So my input is a buffer, and I basically used this example and modified it so that it would work for me. And then I ended up doing this version of it just below because it actually does the parse right after rather than sending it to an extra function, which can have problems if you're getting your data coming in chunks. So I'll show you how I kind of implement that. I'll just walk through it fairly quickly. So in the change of input string, we've got a couple position trackers that we're using, and we've got a string that we're going to put the output data. Now we've got, everything is based on this do loop. So what this do loop is doing, it's adding to temp string by grabbing characters off of this input string, which is defined as a buffer input. So as data gets dropped into here, as it comes from the serial of the TCPIP server, it's a stream of characters. Every character gets added to temp string, and it will do this until all the characters from input string have been read into temp string. That's what this do until the length of input string is 0. So it's get C is pulling characters from that buffer. So from there, you can trace it for debugging if you want, just to see what the string is. Then I'm looking to find 0A. I've escaped it twice, //, because in the case of my test anyways, I realized that it was actually an ASCII character, which means you're not looking for 1 byte, you're looking for one byte, 2 bytes, 3 bytes, 4 bytes. You're looking for the actual ASCII characters. What I heard from the user that I made this module for, they actually ended up having to get rid of this, and it was treated as an actual \x0a as a byte. So you just might have to be careful with how your things are encoded like that. If we've got a 0A, then we've got a record. So this here is a record. This here is a record. Oops. So all of these are records that we can parse through and look for what we're trying to find. So then it becomes somewhat easy. We're just looking for an open tag of player, and I'll show you where that is here. It's not going to be here because this one's all buggered up. It's this top one here. So we're looking for the open tag of player, and I know that's the name. So here, player. So that will be in this packet here. Let's just separate that out so you can see it. This is basically our record that we're evaluating. And I just added some text in here to make sure it would parse okay. So you look for that player, and then we're looking for name with a quotation mark. That's what \x22 is. You could have also done it like this, but I think that's messy. I just like to do \x22. So once we found this record, then we're looking for this. Sorry, we're looking for the quotation mark as well. And that starting point is the position. And then if we find it, then we add 6 characters. That's just the length of this, so that we are going to start grabbing the string here. And we're going to find position 3. Starting at this point, we're finding the next quotation mark. So then we've got a marker for here and a marker for here. We can calculate the string length, and we can output using mid this out of our module, and we can also trace it. So that's a very basic parser that chunks that out. So now I'm going to show you how that works and how we connect to it from our TCPIP client. So the first thing I can check here, I've got it loaded, is to make sure my IP table is online. And it says waiting, so it's looking for a connection. The other command you can try is netstat. If you scroll to the top, you'll see that it's listening on port 50,000 with an address of 0.0.0.0, so it's accepting from all. So that's perfect. So now I'm going to switch over, show you debugger, and then I'm going to show you Crestron data viewer. This is a decent terminal program if you have access to Crestron. I think you might need a login for that. If not, PuTTY works, but you can't send special characters, and it's hard to see what you're sending sometimes. So that's why this is kind of handy. So I can go connect here, TCP/IP. I've got the IP address of my processor. That's that 50,000. And I can connect. You can see right away on this side, connect went high. And I'm just going to change this to unsigned decimal. And then if I type something here, you'll see it comes through there. I just realized that I made a small error. In my SIMPL Plus, I was looking for player, and that was wrong. I actually changed it to the plugin tag, and the name that I actually care about is not the net text. It's at the bottom here. It's this name equals this name. So I've changed that. I've recompiled it. So if I copy this and paste it in, it's reading out the records and it's finding that player name. It found this name and it returned it as a string. If you enjoyed this video, please like it here on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Comment below if you have any thoughts about it, and I'd love to hear from you. And other than that, have a good day, and we'll see you in the next video.